You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday, the 19th of June, 2013. I thought I was safe, then they raped me. Girl tells of alleged sex ring attack. Leah McKinstry, it is madness to get caught in the bloodshed in Syria. Tesco for terrorists. A simple solution, Antwerp jihadists to be scrapped from civil register. Italian mafia earns €16.7 billion in trash environment abuse. Fighting terrorism by arming terrorists. Obama-backed Free Syrian Army jihadists behead a Christian man and feed him to the dogs. Thought for the day, some of your suggestions and what isn't printed in the media. And finally, a real joke, of course not to offend anyone. UK News. I thought I was safe, then they raped me. Girl tells of alleged sex ring attack. A teenage girl thought she was escaping an argument when she got into a car with a Chadwell Heath man, but he took her to her house and raped her, Snaresbrook Crown Court heard on Monday, June 17th, 2013. The girl, who was 18 at the time, told the jury at Snaresbrook Crown Court that Nabil Hamed of Chadwell Heath Lane offered her a lift after seeing her fighting with a friend shortly before midnight on May the 1st last year. Stifling tears, she said, I needed to get away because I felt really scared. My friend had taken all my possessions and it seemed like the only option. She added, I thought it was okay getting in because it felt like the driver of the car had been watching. I felt quite comfortable because he said what he saw and asked if I was okay and asked where I wanted to go. But instead of taking the girl to a train station, Nabil, 24, drove her to a house in Chadwell Heath where they met Anas Iqbal of Newham Way, East Ham, Naeem Ahmed of Westminster Gardens and Hassan Raza, also of Westminster Gardens. The four men are accused of being part of a child sex ring that preyed on vulnerable teenage girls. The girl is one of 6 alleged victims of rape, sexual assault, grooming and exploitation. In recorded video evidence played in court, she told how Naeem, 25, and Nabil came into the bedroom they had given her for the night and got into her bed. When she tried to get up and cried, they pulled her back down and told her to shut up, she said. She was then allegedly raped by Naeem, then Nabil, then Naeem again. Shaking, she said, I had been crying, I felt violated, I felt like absolute whatever. I felt dirty and disgusting, I just wanted to go home and have a wash. I just wanted to get away from everybody, but I felt like I couldn't do anything about the matter and I was panicking and waiting for it to be over. According to prosecutors, the group had picked up several other girls in cars around Redbridge and Chadwell Heath between late 2011 and December 2012 and targeted some through a care home. Nabil denies 3 counts of rape and his brother Jamil, 25, of Neville Road, Dagenham, denies 2. Naeem, 25, denies 5 counts of rape, controlling child prostitution, paying for the sexual services of a child, inciting child prostitution and causing prostitution for a gain. Iqbal, 25, denies 6 counts of rape and paying for the sexual services of a child. Hassan Raza, 23, denies sexual assault. The trial continues. World at 8 says, what can one really say without being accused of being anti-Islamic? Leah McKinstry, it's madness to get caught in the bloodshed in Syria. A form of collective insanity seems to have gripped the government over Syria. Disastrous meddling and self-indulgent posturing have replaced any respect for the British national interest. In their irrational enthusiasm for the hardline rebels fighting the regime of President Bashar al-Assad, David Cameron and the Foreign Secretary William Hague are not only dragging us into dangerous conflict that has absolutely nothing to do with our country, but even worse, they are giving support to the ideological enemies of the West. Less than a month ago, in an atrocity that shook our nation, a pair of Islamist fanatics hacked to death drummer Lee Rigby in broad daylight on a London street. Yet now, with almost lunatic perversity and contempt for Lee Rigby's memory, senior ministers are effectively backing the Islamic cause in the Syrian civil war. In interviews over the weekend, Cameron tried to justify his policy by arguing that the downfall of Assad would usher in a free, democratic, pluralistic Syria. But that is just pathetic self-delusion. President Assad might be a cruel dictator, but many of his opponents appear to be even more brutal, fuelled by their fanatical Sunni Muslim extremist dogma, the same creed that inspires al-Qaeda. Rebel soldiers have reportedly massacred civilians and even eaten the organs of dead prisoners. In one appalling incident in the rebel-held city of Aleppo, anti-Assad militia twice shot a 14-year-old boy in the face and killed him, all for the crime of allegedly insulting the Prophet Muhammad. These are not the people to establish a new era of freedom and tolerance in Syria. In fact, the rebels don't have any democratic basis whatsoever. Even in Aleppo, supposedly one of the rebel strongholds, 70% of the population support Assad. Tesco for terrorists. David Cameron has been warned against sending arms to Syrian rebels amid fears they would end up in the hands of Islamic terrorists who target the West. Up to 3,000 surface-to-air missiles have gone missing in Libya since the conflict began, and spy chiefs say the state has become the Tesco of the world's illegal arms trade. More than 1 million tonnes of weapons belonging to Colonel Gaddafi were looted from arms dumps after the dictator was toppled in October 2011. MI6 agents fear a large number of weapons, which included 22,000 shoulder-launched missiles capable of bringing down an aircraft, have been smuggled out of Libya to groups linked to al-Qaeda. Security sources are said to fear that, if the rebels fighting tyrant Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria are armed by the West, a similar situation could arise there, with the weapons falling into the hands of Islamic extremists in the country. European news. A simple solution. Antwerp jihadis to be scrapped from civil register. The Mayor of Antwerp, Bart de Wever, nationalist, has said that the young men from the port city that had gone to fight with Islamist rebels in Syria will be scrapped from the civil register. This means that they will no longer have an official address here and will lose their right to benefits. Friday's edition of the Daily Gazette van Antwerpen reports that the Federal Interior Minister, Joëlle Milquet, Francophone Christian Democrat, has no issues with the measure, although she does doubt whether they will be effective. Scrapping these people from the civil registers is something that falls under my brief as mayor. It's a long drawn-out procedure that has already been started up. Several checks have shown that they no longer live in the city. The Mayor of Antwerp also calls on young Muslims not to head for Syria this summer. Don't listen to the radicals. There is a big chance that you won't come back from Syria. It's hell over there, Mayor de Wever told the paper. Mr de Wever added that he didn't believe that there was much chance that those already in Syria would return. These Antwerp jihadis know they will face prosecution. They will be detained if they show their faces here again. Bart de Wever says that there are 22 jihadis from Antwerp currently in Syria. They all had ties with the now defunct Islamic group Sharia for Belgium. They are all adults, some are even married with children, and often take their families over to Syria. They probably intend never to return, the Mayor of Antwerp told VRT Radio News. Italian mafia earns €16.7 billion in trash environment abuse. Rome. The mafia in Italy made an estimated €6.7 billion last year by illegally trafficking waste and exploiting the environment, a report released Monday said. According to environmental group Legambiente, over 34,000 environmental crimes were recorded in 2012, with 28,132 people charged and over 8,000 properties and accounts confiscated. The number of organised gangs involved grew from 296 to 302, while the number of city governments dissolved for mafia infiltration more than quadrupled on that year, from 6 to 25. Said the 2013 Eco-Mafia report, which relied on police data. Also on the rise were instances of forest arson, unlawful building and corruption, the latter of which saw a twofold increase. World news. Fighting terrorism by arming terrorists. The Obama administration appears to be moving towards arming rebels in Syria, though the White House has only publicly confirmed an increase in the scope and scale of its military support. By one estimate, 7 of 9 key rebel combatant groups are Islamist. As the civil war has dragged on, the rebels have become more Islamist and more extreme, The Economist reports. Arms shipments approved by the Obama administration have already ended up in the hands of jihadists in Libya. The weapons and money from Qatar strengthen the militant groups in Libya, reported the New York Times, allowing them to become a destabilising force since the fall of the Gaddafi government. Obama-backed Free Syrian Army jihadists behead a Christian man and feed him to the dogs. Ecstatic at news of brother Obama's decision to send more arms, equipment, money and military trainers to help the al-Qaeda linked jihadists of the Free Syrian Army, they celebrated by beheading a Christian and feeding his corpse to the dogs. UK Daily Mail. Al-Qaeda-led Syrian rebels beheaded a Christian man and fed his body to dogs, according to a nun who says the West is ignoring the atrocities committed by Islamic extremists. The nun said taxi driver Andrei Arbash, 38, was kidnapped after his brother was heard complaining that fighters against the ruling regime behaved like bandits. She said his headless corpse was found by the side of the road, surrounded by hungry dogs. He had recently married and was soon to be a father. Sister Agnes Mariam de la Croix said his only crime was his brother criticised the rebels, accusing them of acting like bandits, which is what they are. Sister Agnes Miriam, Mother Superior of the Monastery of St James the Mutilated, has condemned Britain and the West for supporting the rebels despite growing evidence of human rights abuses. Murder, kidnapping, rape and robbery are becoming commonplace, she says. The free and democratic world is supporting extremists, Signa Agnes, she said from her sanctuary in Lebanon. They want to impose Sharia law and create an Islamic state in Syria. There have been a growing number of accounts of atrocities carried out by rogue elements of the Syrian Free Army, which opposes dictator Bashar al-Assad and is recognised by Britain and the West as a legitimate leadership. One of the most effective fighting forces is the Jabhat al-Nusra, which has an ideology similar to al-Qaeda. The uprising has been hijacked by Islamist mercenaries who are more interested in fighting a holy war than in changing the government, she said. It has turned into a sectarian conflict, one in which Christians are paying a high price. The rebels attacked the northern town of Ras Al-Ain on the Turkish border last month. The fighters entered the Christian quarter, ordering civilians to leave and leaving their homes. More than 200 families were driven out in the night, Sister Agnes Miriam says. People are afraid. Everywhere the death squads stop civilians, abduct them and ask for ransom, and sometimes they kill. Militants wearing black bandanas of al-Qaeda recently laid siege to the Monastery of St James the Mutilated, located between Damascus and Homs, for 2 days in an attempt to prevent Christian celebrations, the nun claims. An estimated 300,000 Christians have been displaced in the conflict, with 80,000 forced out of the Homs region alone. Many have fled abroad, raising fears that Syria's Christian community may vanish, like others across the Middle East, the birthplace of Christianity. Thought for the day. Some of your suggestions and what is not printed in the media. Now today's thought is a dual mix because the media is really kicking off, or not, on the real meaning of life today in the UK, and I've taken on board many of the suggestions that were sent in to me on the web comments or on the web comments pages and need to see the light of day. I have had some very good and interesting suggestions regarding World at 8, some doable in the near future and some that will have to go onto the drawing board owing to lack of time and money. I've covered the suggestion of reading out some public comments with the fact that other listeners can read them on the website for themselves. Dedicating a couple of slots a month to interviewing other members and activists is really good, and we would have to get some time together with the BNP TV people who could help with that, as we are a news pod, not a travelling news team like the main TV news channels. It could be done but would need a lot of organisation. The other way to approach it would be to have these members send in their recordings to us under a strict rota, and they could be inserted into the news in their own slots, yet another way of expanding the news for the party. I've had several suggestions from Vince BNP to include other European nationalists, and this too is very interesting. It would also require a great deal of communication and time to arrange, and the only thing I would say is that I've had dealings with a person from a Polish national publication over a year ago when the EU Nationalist Alliance came over, and when he returned he asked me for a couple of 1,000-word report on the Muslim communities and the grooming problems. This I did and sent it off and have heard nothing since. Don't know if it was published or used as loo paper. So we'd have to tread very carefully in that direction, as not everyone is as organised as we are in this party. I had a very good input from Kugelschreiber, and yes, the processor will still be moi, matey, with the Lynn stamp of approval, of course. I appreciate that you appreciate my posh English accent, as I cannot change it, but of course I could do my deep Devonian accent under the guise of Devon calling, and make appeals to the cider-making industries down there. Only joking because I'm bound to offend somebody. Your suggestions are excellent and, like some other, do need working on for the future. The live interviews with other BNP personnel would be good, and this is how the EU Belly of the Beast started out, but of course now NG sends in his recorded voice. Personal interviews could be done, but would need, as I have said, a lot of work behind the scenes. Talks about economics and finance would be great. Do you know of anyone who can contribute to this? I myself am a complete and utter dyslexic when it comes to figures and economy, and just survive with the basics of those particular topics, but can understand it would be much more interesting for certain listeners to have. Can you work on that for us? I will do in future news a short talk on certain historic aspects of our country and perhaps include folk stories to go along with it. A suggestion from Percy Brown mentioned historical towns and the fact that there was a slot some months ago, and he is right. Our Jack Dandelion sent in recordings of his travels, which were very popular. However, after a few weeks he set up his own news broadcast on the BNP website, and I've heard nothing since. I'm happy to look into this aspect and do a short slot, say once a month, on a particular town and any special and interesting facts on it. I apologise to all who've said that they're sick of Muslims and their goings on and the general ghastliness of the results of immigration over the last 40 years, but of course you have to admit that not only is our British National Party concerned with those factors, but they do have a profound effect on our everyday life. So we'll try to dumb down Islamic nasties, but not too much, because that will be going the way of all media today. Most, if not all, the printed news and unprinted news concerns the Muslim world, whether over here or elsewhere. Facts, I'm afraid, are facts. I'm happy to do interviews and will work along those lines, but sorry about my accent. But we could get different accents on interviews in the future. Now I will comment on some news items which haven't made the main papers in force, considering the rating that crime should bring, and I'm of course talking about the murder of Lee Rigby in broad daylight, in public, in our capital city, London. The TV news has been strangely or not so strangely reticent on this subject, no doubt for fear of encouraging reprisals or revenge against the Muslim communities these two bastards sprung from. But I did find a column on it in the Mirror from earlier this month. It's reported on the appearance, or rather non-appearance, of Adebolajo, or rather the video link from Belmarsh prison, which is where he is being held, and during which Adebolajo, or should we call him his new name of, wait for it, Mujahid Abu Hamza, took over the video link, which had to be cut off because of the haranguing the court received from this man, who should be shot without trial, and the cost of the bullets sent to his family just before deportation back to their homeland. Amidst the ridiculous religious and race-hate verbals, this swine claimed to be a soldier of Allah. That deserves a bullet for a start. This guy is in the wrong country. Our country. I fear that when the two of them, like the song, do appear together, as they are finally going to be rooted out of their pits and will have to appear in person at the Old Bailey on June the 28th, it'll be like Little and Large pontificating about their obviously very good reasons to hack an innocent young man to death, and about which there should be no shortage of witnesses, if they can get their butts out of gear and make the journey, if they're subpoenaed, or maybe they are still coming to terms with their trauma, as opposed to Lee's young widow and child. So we in the UK justice system are protecting Muslim murderers yet again because of our fear over the backlash to their communities, like the cowards we are. A reprisal to the Woolwich murder, which is incidentally classed as an attack in the Maidenhead news, was the breaking of a window in a local mosque, and for which the Muslim leader Fazal Awan stated, amidst other platitudes, that all Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, Jews and Hindus live together in peace in Maidenhead, or rather like an ad for Coca-Cola, in perfect harmony. Well, if he thinks that one broken window is a just reprisal for a thoughtless and horrible murder by one of his own, then his view of life is just as I thought. One sentiment for a Muslim and another for a kafir. Incidentally, the Lee Rigby murder, whilst dying the death over here, did make President Putin's speech to the G8 and their attitude over interfering in Syria, in which Mr President likened the same people who killed this young man as the so-called rebels in Syria. And although the news showed it, it was off air rather quickly because it doesn't fit in with the multicultural ethos of both the BBC and ITV. Good for Putin, I say. The brand new news of an Asian grooming gang in Scotland has only hit the headlines on the British National Party website from what I can see. Although we did mention it on Monday World at 8, this will not hit the fan, although I'm hoping the Scots react to this the way they reacted to that idiot Farage and have a few demos just for good luck. I quote, "Reports of Muslim and paedophile gangs operating in Scotland have revealed that the problem of the grooming and rape of white girls by Asian men is not only confined to northern English towns." Don't you love that, Asian men? In the wake of the recent convictions in Derby and arrests in Rochdale, a young Glasgow girl has come forward to the media with her own horrific story of abuse at the hands of Muslim gangs. Carolyn, not her real name, who lived in Newlands on the south side of Glasgow, tells of how she started a relationship with a man called Nazir when she was 14. "He told me he was 21 and he really liked me. I was young, stupid and naive, so I believed him." Caroline, who is now 16, said, "I really had no idea he was part of a gang. He seemed like the perfect gentleman." The poor victims of the Scottish underage sexual abuse, because that is what it is, sexual abuse is not grooming a horse, will go quietly into the dark night, as indeed, apart from a few paragraphs in the first flurry some weeks ago, the Oxford sexual abuse, abduction and torture of underage female children has also gone quietly away. But it hasn't in the local Free Bucks press. Oh no, they're still running the story because most of the accused were from High Wycombe. Now, that now hotbed and second to Southall den of Muslim so-called communities. What is classed as a member of a vicious sex gang threatened to burn down the house of a young victim and blacken her family's name, a court heard. The girl, now aged 17 but 12 at the time she was befriended by Ibn al-Fiyaz online, which shows these bastards are keeping up with the times and have now given up hanging around schools and coffee places for their prey. They're now doing it over the web. Wonderful. The names of these pimps are, and please note they are all Muslim, not just Pakistani and certainly not British. Ibn al-Fiyaz, 21. Qasim Fiyaz, 22, same address. Amar Rafiq, 19. Mohammed Adnan, 21, Mudassar Hussain, 29, Jubrion Khan, 21, Qasim Dad, 23, Ramiz Ali, 21 and Janed Sharif, 26. There, Fazl Awan of Maidenhead, a real clutch of rapists, criminals and child abusers, and all from Muslim communities, and all bearing out my mantra of over 2 years ago, of this being a family concern and certainly a business for those families involved. At these ages most of these men are probably married and producing yet more sons to carry on the tradition of abusing children from a different religion, not necessarily just white children, although even in this country prepubescent white girls are more available in the so-called white country than other ethnic persuasions. What I find disgusting and beyond belief is that these men are all over 18 and answerable as adults in law, and their victims are all taken in a premeditated fashion and over some years, and all moreover under the age of sexual consent at the time taken, and yet these men will not receive the full weight of British law, which should be amended especially for men committing crimes in their host country. That is, immediate deportation for them and their families, all parents, all grandparents, in fact the entire family line deported, without the funds offered for voluntary repatriation. Their offspring have committed crimes against our humanity and should be punished as such, and not given the leeway that we give members of a certain community because we are frightened. It'll only get worse if we do nothing as a people. In Ashton-under-Lyne the victimisation of young white girls is evident, and it must seem strange for people in other countries that we Brits are putting up and shutting up about such serious inroads into our younger generations. Just as snide comments in The Commentator, who have gone online with this story and video, have printed. They class the perpetrators as British Pakistani, which is wrong because they don't look British, they look pure Pakistani to me, and there, wait for another boo-boo, anti-terrorism expert Ghaffar Hussain classed this anti-white and anti-Christian crime as a local squabble between groups of youths. Well, he's the right name for terrorism, hasn't he? It is this reduction of Muslim crime in the eyes of the public that does the damage. Even the average downtrodden and selfish Brit can read between the lines, which is why most of the news I've read doesn't hit the nationals or the TV news, because it's so-called biased news against our new friends, the Muslim communities. Avoiding a certain fact that it is growing and has grown through massive immigration in certain towns and cities in the UK will not make it go away as the media would wish it. All these problems and more hidden ones will not go away, as most, if not all, the perpetrators are from immigrant Muslim communities growing in numbers every day and year within our country and cities, and they make no bones about their lack of respect for both us, our country, our religion, our governments, our legal systems and our police force. Why? Because we let them get away with everything they do and just write a sodding letter. I would like to think these people haven't yet seen reprisals, but I fear they just might have for the time being. Let's see what June the 28th brings with the Old Bailey appearance of the Woolwich 2, shall we? Of course it depends on just how much you taxpayers will have to pay to keep these bastards safe, won't it? Very interesting. And finally, a real joke, not of course to offend anyone. One of the suggestions was for a really funny, and I've got one for today. Pin back your lugholes. A soldier ran up to a nun. Out of breath he asked, "Please may I hide under your skirt? I'll explain later." The nun agreed. A moment later 2 military police ran up and asked, "Sister, have you seen a soldier?" The nun replied, "He went that way." After the MPs ran off, the soldier crawled out from under her skirt and said, "I can't thank you enough, sister. You see, I don't want to go to Iraq." The nun said, "I understand completely." The soldier added, "I hope I'm not rude, but you have a great pair of legs." The nun replied, "If you'd looked a little higher, you'd have seen a great pair of balls. I don't want to go to Iraq either." You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozar and I wish you all a very good night.